Every day, millions of Australians head to work. It's where many have spent half their lives, most expected to return home at the end of the day. Some never did. In this episode, death underground, survival against the odds, and amazing escapes, deadly demolition, and construction gone wrong. On Savage Australia, Deadly Industry. Before European settlement, minerals in Australia were highly prized for their pigment-producing qualities and were used to create the amazing rock art, which is recognised internationally for its cultural and historical significance.
Well, Aboriginals have used minerals in Australia for a long time. Pigment's obviously one of them, ochre, which is clay, white, which is kaolin, the yellowy ones, which are limonitic clays, and also the redder ones, which are hematitic clays. Well, it didn't take long after European settlement to begin mining. It formally dates discovery of coal from 1797, both in the area that became Newcastle and also south in the Illawarra, and that coal was exploited from 1799 on.
But it was the gold rush of the 1850s that attracted the attention of the world, with immigrants flocking all over Victoria and New South Wales, including towns like Ballarat and Bendigo, to seek their fortune. Soon, Australia was producing over 1/3 of the world's gold.
The 1850s in part was the era of the individual and the small group miners, men panning, women panning too, cradles and so on, very low-tech.
Some had no luck. A few struck it rich.
Gold mining continued, and you got development of machinery and a whole new industry, which is far more technologically based, was developed over time.
The men of the Golden Mile work under the earth in a maze of drives and tunnels and shafts. 1,000 feet below the surface, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 feet under the ground, ripping out millions of tons of ore with machines and high explosives.
Australia now, because of all of the exploration and the developments and the ongoing mining we have, we're one of the world's largest producers of a whole range of minerals and energy.
But along with the wealth and national prosperity came tragedy. Appin Colliery was one of a number of mines operating near the Illawarra escarpment in New South Wales. On the night of July 29th, 1979, a small mining community was rocked by a massive explosion. "45 men were working in the mine when the explosion was ignited by a rush of methane gas in a remote tunnel about 3 kilometres underground. Rescue attempts were hampered by the unstable conditions, including fires, cave-ins and deadly gases.
By daybreak, bodies of the victims lay still trapped amid the rubble of the mine. Ambulances waited at the top of the mine shaft for them to be brought out.
Eventually, a specialist disaster squad headed down to retrieve the bodies.
A coal train bearing the 10 bodies surfaced shortly after 6 o'clock tonight. They were found 500 metres underground in a canteen just off the main shaft. Mine officials say the men were extremely close to the centre of the explosion. They had no chance of survival.
The remaining bodies were brought to the surface throughout the day. 14 men died in the disaster. In 1972, an emergency broke out at the Box Flat mine in Queensland, when 14 men entered the shaft to extinguish an out-of-control fire.
At 2:45 this morning, tragedy occurred. A call from the number 7 shaft, where 14 men were below, came from a miner a member of the Mines Rescue Brigade who'd gone down to help. John Roach called on a telephone, said the situation was getting worse and the men were to abandon the mine. It is believed they are actually in the process of coming above when the blast occurred, burying these 14 below and instantly killing 3 men who were standing at the mouth of number 5 shaft.
The mine was sealed that day.
It was considered so unsafe to try and recover the 14 bodies still left in the mine. And that's a very sad thing when you have to leave the men there rather than at least recover their bodies.
Yallourn, a thriving town of 4,000 people in the Latrobe Valley of Gippsland. Its powerhouse is the keystone of Victoria's light and power supply. This power comes from brown coal. Yallourn Powerhouse produces more than 2/3 of all the electricity used in the state of Victoria.
The Morwell River has been moved 6 times to allow access to new coal deposits near the Yallourn Mine. The river had been diverted through the mine precinct and was close to capacity after significant rainfall. Alarmingly, small leaks had begun appearing in the surrounding tunnels when suddenly the earth gave way. The land split open, forming a giant chasm, unleashing a raging torrent which poured into the open-cut mine. The scale of the damage was mind-blowing and entirely preventable, the result of gross mismanagement of the river system.
In flood conditions, it broke through the bank, flooded the mine, and they couldn't dig out the coal and therefore couldn't generate the electricity that they would normally do using the coal.
Luckily, there were no casualties, but it was a spectacular event which caused a 2-week power crisis throughout the state. The Tasmanian town of Beaconsfield is in the heart of the Tamar Valley wine region, where the past is tinged with stories of gold, wealth and tragedy. Located on the western banks of the Tamar River, Beaconsfield was once Tasmania's richest gold town. On April 25th, 17 men set out for work underground at the Beaconsfield gold mine. 3 men would not come home: Larry Knight, Todd Russell and Brant Webb. All 3 would be working together that night. The joint task, 920 metres below the surface, was to line the walls and ceiling of the tunnel with steel mesh to guard against rock falls. It was a routine assignment on what seemed a routine day.
It was just quiet as any other normal day.
Actually, it was really good, actually.
It was.
It was bloody magnificent. Because normally there's something going on, you know, like the ground's always shifting and moving, you know. Most of the time you're hearing something or seeing something.
Todd and Brant were working out of a basket. The third man, Larry Knight, operated a forklift cherry picker machine. It was this machine that held them there. But the quiet was shattered when a seismic event measuring 2.3 on the Richter scale, akin to a mini earthquake, occurred about 40 metres from where the 3 were working.
We'd only just been leaning out of the baskets 30 or 40 seconds prior. All I can recall then is just this almighty crack and wind blast.
It was something else.
Yeah, it actually pushed me around into a fetal position with quite a substantial amount of rock on top of me.
14 men were unharmed after reaching a safety chamber. 3 were missing.
I just remember the first thing was Todd yelling, you know, "Are you all right? Are you there?" You know. I pulled my lighter out of my pocket and I went, "Oh, this is really bad, you know. This is a really bad scenario we're in here now."
The cage was partially filled with rock, with the 2 men half buried.
I was screaming for Larry to get us out. There was no answer from Larry. I called again, probably 2 or 3 times. And then Brant here answered me. I said to Brant, "Are you right? Are you right?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I can't move my legs." He said, "My legs are pinned." I said, "Yep." I said, "I'm in the same boat, mate." I said, "I've got a lot of rock on me." And the more I tried to get myself out, the more it packed around me, and it was taking my breath away. It was putting pressure on me. And I'm saying to Brent...
A lot of pressure.
A lot of pressure, I'm saying to Brent...
A lot of pressure.
We've got to get me out of here. We've got to get me out.
Very shallow breaths.
Yeah, very shallow breaths, which is getting towards my last breaths. And yeah, I shut my eyes and I just imagine, I could just see the picture of the wife and the 3 children. And I said to myself, I'm not dying here. I said, no, I'm not dying here. This take a bit more and a bit of rock to stop me.
It was more than a bit of rock. Above them were tons of rock ready to fall in on them, and all that was holding them up was a piece of wire mesh.
We had a section of mesh, that by that, to protect ourselves.
The safety cage had been almost completely destroyed. Brant frantically cut away his clothing with a Stanley knife in order to reach Todd.
I cut the straps off me to get myself out, and then I had to cut down the inside of my boot to get my foot out because there was just too much rock still there, but I knew the severity of Todd because he was going down pretty hard, weren't you?
Yeah.
Once Brant had freed himself, he was able to lift the rubble off Todd and let him breathe again. But the ordeal was far from over.
I said, I'm gonna go and find a way out. There's got to be a way out. We followed the air, where the air was coming from, and that's what I was following. I was following that air.
Brant then dug a tunnel through the rubble with his bare hands, trying to find a way out. He made a 5.5 metre tunnel before turning back.
Brant got back in the basket. He was very wet and shivering with, well, what I thought was near hypothermia. So at that stage I said to Brant, you've got to come close to me. So as much as he disliked it, he had to come close so I could give him a cuddle to give him a bit of body warmth, which, you know, it really worked well.
Good evening. A major rescue operation is underway in Tasmania tonight, where a wall collapse in an underground gold mine has trapped 3 workers.
No one had felt the tremor at the time, but the aftershock was felt deeply.
There is a very sombre mood around the community today.
We're all working as hard and as quickly as we can.
15 hours after collapse, a remote control earth mover with a camera is sent in to evaluate. It was a bad situation, but there was one positive, and it kept them alive.
We had very limited water. We had a drip, and we're pretty lucky because it was groundwater. If it was mine water, we'd end up with diarrhoea and, you know, we'd be in a hell of a state then. I had a music bar in my pocket, and then about day 2, I said, Todd, I've been holding out, I've got a music bar, you know, like, and we cut it in half this thing, you know.
But Brant said, Brant said, we'll wait 24 hours.
Yeah.
I said, no worries, we'll stretch it.
Then
he said, we got to that 24 hours, I'm not hungry, we'll wait another 24.
Yeah.
So in the end, it got to ended up 48 hours, and I said to Brant, we've got to cut this thing in half. Measured it up, so he gave me half, and he took his half, and we'd be sitting there, taking just the littlest bites and putting it back in the pocket.
As the rescue continued on day 3, worst fears were realised.
7:22 this morning, one body was found during the rescue process at the Beaconsfield mine site.
Larry Knight was found buried under 120 tonnes of rock. Although one man had been lost, the search for Todd and Brant went on. Todd's father and his family were hanging in.
Thanks go out to all still working the rescue attempt to bring Todd and Brad home.
On day 5, rescuers began blasting a new tunnel, detonating at least 6 explosive charges.
4 and 5 were pretty horrific days for us. We didn't know if they touched the machine, if it was all going to cave in on us again. You know, it was this thing where, oh, geez, I hope they're coming, but geez, I hope they don't touch nothing.
The blasts dislodged the precarious rock suspended above Brant and Todd. They frantically tried to clear it, not knowing if the next blast would mean their end.
It was a bit daunting, but you kept telling me it's a rescue, they never go into recovery mode. But he had to keep telling that to me because I was just going there, he's just going to blow us up.
We just sit there with our eyes shut, just waiting. About 5 minutes later, the explosion to go off. You know, boom, 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 and you can feel the percussion.
Everything can be shaking, and you know, like, and
we get
all
little
rocks would be flying. Yeah. And on that 6th time, we're sort of thinking, well, geez, they're getting close now.
But each time they'd fire, we'd look at Brant, we'd shake hands, there's another one, mate.
Todd recorded the time and date of each blast on his clothing. So, if an explosion killed them, rescuers would know they'd been alive right up until then.
I think you go through the whole gambit of emotions, you know, from despair at times, maybe, you know, maybe they were that strong a character. They always believed they would get out, you know. People who have got good family and friends and something to live for is the other driving factor, you know, so you can go through a lot for loved ones.
At about 5:45 p.m. on day 6, 2 rescuers breached safety protocols by entering the unsafe level. When they got to the rockfall, they started yelling out for the miners.
You gotta know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em.
Todd and Brant almost didn't hear the rescuers because they were too busy singing.
We were just trying to make time go by and singing just...
We were singing the Gambler, weren't we? We were singing the Gambler.
We got halfway through the Gambler and we sang the Coward of the Cow.
Coward, yeah.
And I said to Brant, I said, quiet, Brant, quiet. He said, what? I said, no, listen. And that's when we heard our first verbal conversation with guys.
Our first words were, shut up in there, you blokes. They're yelling out, shut up, because they're trying to yell out to us, and we're in there singing top of our voices.
Hello, are there 2 of you there? How are you, boys?
I think Brant done everything but kiss me.
I think I did actually kiss me anyway.
They were so tantalisingly close. There was a chance they could be dug out from above. To do that would require them to cut through the wire, but the 2 men were afraid that cutting the cage would cause it to collapse.
Because they had to cut some of the wire away to get the stuff to us. The tension on the wire wasn't just like a normal cut with the wire. You could hear it
went
like
off
pinging
like
when they cut it.
Yeah,
that's how much pressure was on the wire.
You know,
so
yeah.
I think there could have been anything up to 1,000 or more tonne of dirt sitting above us. It was a consideration.
They were considering getting us out that way. We actually asked them not to get us out that way.
Both of those guys have been involved in mines rescue, so you had to be pretty well spot on with what you were saying and always take advice from them.
And we said, well, orchestrate a plan A for us because plan B is not much of an option to us. We don't know we're going to, you know, what you're going to get out. Are you going to get live bodies out or are you going to get dead bodies out? So we'd done the hard yards and we thought, well,
we weren't going to die.
We can
that
do
way.
them a few more hard yards yet, you know. At the end of the day, we can hang on.
We've gone 6 days without food now. We can go another 6 days without food.
We need to be very clear. This is an extreme operation. This is going to be long and difficult.
Plan A was tunnelling from an adjacent shaft 12 metres to the side. But first, they managed to drill a smaller hole with a plastic tube inserted through it, delivering food, blankets, iPods, even hot omelettes.
They've put in a request for chicken sandwiches tonight. To have 2 guys alive is one hell of a change from Sunday evening, and the health that they're in is just quite remarkable.
They've got light, you know, those snap-on fluorescent lights. They've had a change of clothes, dry clothing, that's important. So part 1 is they're getting their food, they're getting their supplies, and they are in regular communication with their workmates and their rescuers.
While it was smiles all round above ground, below was a different story.
I wasn't in a very good frame of mind at that stage. What went through my head was, well, now they know we're alive. That's great. Now they're going to put in a supply tube for food. Well, that's great. But now we're going to be stuck here for bloody ever.
Finally, on the 15th day, it happened.
You can see the rock starting to lift. Next thing it fell away, and I said to Brant, have a look here. You can see a light.
Yeah.
And he's breaking his way through the rock.
Real slowly, you know.
And it started getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Next thing, the first thing we did, we put our hands down and shook the guy's hands. And
the next thing you know, it was like 2 possums in a hole looking out at me.
Brant was the first to be extracted, then came Todd.
Pull them out on their back, we put them into a troopy and bring them into a holding area before we brought them above ground. And that's where we had a medical team.
And I said to this doctor, I said, look, mate, I said, we are walking out of here whether you like it or not. I said, and we are having a shower. We walked into that cage to go underground. We're going to walk out to tag off.
What's the first thing you're going to say to your dad?
Took your time.
Yeah.
When the bell went, that's when we opened the door and we came out to freedom. And just to see that amount of people standing there, and it was mind-blowing, you know.
Then a guard of honour and a hero's parade past the people of Beaconsfield.
They're coming out
come up with the doors
with the
open.
doors open.
Oh, fantastic.
There's Todd.
The Man Mountain.
But amongst all the joy and celebration, there was one family who was grieving. The family of Larry Knight, the miner who never made it out. And in a wonderful gesture, the aunt and uncle of Larry cheered them on. For 2 weeks, the world had watched as the drama unfolded. It ended with a day Australia will never forget. The greatest structures stand as a testament to man's ingenuity and enterprise. But often they also stand as a memorial to those who lost their lives during their construction. The industry is inherently dangerous.
You idiots.
And the fact is, Australia lags so far behind other countries on construction safety. In the UK in 2014, the number of deaths per 100,000 workers was 0.44. In Australia, it was 2.24, making construction workers here 5 times more likely to die on the job than their English counterparts. That same year on Australian construction sites, there were 12,300 serious injuries. That's 5 workers seriously hurt every hour of every working day. Even relatively minor construction projects can result in tragedy. A fire had broken out on a crane in a busy Sydney construction site. As fire crews were attempting to climb up, the heat and strain from the fire burned through the cables. The boom buckled and collapsed onto the construction site below. One man with a fire extinguisher was still 65 metres up when the crane dropped. It was a mad scramble to get down.
It was a very brave effort for the crews to go ascend that height.
Amazingly, no one was injured. Just before midday on the 15th of October 1970, 2 years into the construction of the Westgate Bridge in Melbourne, workmen heard an eerie pinging noise in the air.
And I said, there's something going on. I think this bridge is falling. And I could hear this awful noise.
A storm of rust and flakes peeled away from the structure and the steel girders began to turn blue. The bridge suddenly fell away from beneath their feet. There was an explosion of gas, dust and mangled metal, causing nearby buildings to shake, and the thud from the impact could be heard many kilometres away.
Ambulances came from all over the city. They rushed the injured to the Royal Melbourne and Footscray and District hospitals.
At the moment they're bringing in a large crane. Apparently there are quite a few people trapped underneath the wreckage, and it's, of course, terribly heavy. And the problem is, of course, to get the debris off the people who are trapped underneath. We do believe that there are quite a few people trapped underneath who are alive, but the problem is getting this mass of concrete and steel and girders and pylons off so that the rescue workers can get at the people who are trapped.
A huge concrete and steel span on the western side had collapsed. It was over 100 metres long. The 2,000-tonne mass plummeted 50 metres and crashed into the workyard and Yarra River mud below.
Dead and injured were being brought out of almost inaccessible spots. This man was alive. He might have been saved by the fact that he fell into thick mud.
Many of the workers who perished were on a lunch break in the huts directly beneath the structure when it fell.
Well, actually, it was nearly time for dinner when the accident happened. And I just happened to get on the lift, one of the lucky ones. And when I come on the ground there, I happened to see everything coming down. I don't know what I felt, I tell you the truth. I just broke down.
Others were working on and inside the concrete girders, and some died after riding the concrete and steel to the ground.
Police skin divers were called in to search the river for bodies. It's thought that 67 men were working on the top section of the span when it collapsed. They either fell with the bridge or were flung into the river.
The tragic failure of the bridge was caused by a removal of a number of bolts in plating near the midspan in an attempt to straighten out a buckle in one of the 8 panels. As the bolts were removed, the bridge snapped back and the span collapsed. 35 workers were dead. It is still Australia's worst industrial accident outside mining.
There it is.
There's nothing quite like the sight of a massive construction's last moments. The demolition of these power stations went strictly to plan, destroyed much quicker than it took to put them up. This silo just outside Brisbane was about to bite the dust. Or maybe not. With 100 kilos of explosives, not quite enough.
Yes, it didn't quite go to plan.
At first, the initial shockwave had locals cheering. But unlike the building, the celebrations fell apart.
Oh, it didn't break, it didn't break.
The demolition crew tried pushing and they tried digging. Eventually, they brought in a giant jackhammer. After 40 long minutes, the 50-year-old barley storage facility for a local beer brewer was now 4,000 tonnes of rubble. These 5 stacks at a refinery in Sydney were to be brought down within seconds of each other. A plan years in the making. All of the stacks complied, except one. There was a wobble, but it wouldn't come down. It was hit again and again, but remained resolutely upright. After a lot of inspection, discussion, and dangerous close-up work, the stack finally gave in. But there was one fateful demolition when mistakes led to a terrible tragedy. It was the morning of the 13th of July, 1997, and the crowds lined the shore of Lake Burley Griffin in Canberra to witness the implosion demolition of the old Canberra Hospital. Boats of all types took up the best vantage points as the countdown approached.
3, 2, 1, firing.
But things went badly wrong as the blast catapulted huge chunks of debris hundreds of metres across the lake and into the crowded foreshore. At first, onlookers were not sure what to make of it. But then the realisation came. People had been hit.
There's just people crying, just absolutely, you know, this lady's just completely out. It was just outrageous.
Those on the lake ducked for cover as missiles smashed into the water around them, with canoes capsizing.
I just moved over and next thing I know, bang, and into the water.
Rowing crews were amongst those caught in the deadly shower of rubble.
I was craned skyward with the rest of the members of my crew, looking at chunk-sized, football-sized pieces of steel and rock coming down all around us.
Debris landed as far as 500 metres away. Emergency crews rushed to treat victims amongst the chaos. 12-year-old Katie Bender had been standing with her family well outside the zone authorities deemed safe. She was hit by debris and killed instantly. 9 other people were hospitalised. The demolition gone wrong left both the hospital buildings and, tragically, a family's life in ruins. Many survivors of industrial accidents owe their lives to the skill and dedication of their rescuers, some of whom put their own lives on the line. This situation in a quarry in Queensland was one of those rescues. Upside down, trapped inside and hanging over the edge, the driver literally centimetres from death. For 90 minutes, this dangling rig driver became the focus of a terrifying rescue operation. With Queensland firefighters calling the shots, 2 excavators were shifted in to anchor the machinery. From there, ropes and ladders were rolled out and set to burst open the driver's door. Then began a death-defying walk of faith, a rescuer going up and over and then into the cabin as it remained hanging over the edge of the quarry cliff. Their target was secured with safety ropes and set off on a nerve-jangling climb to safety. His feet firmly on solid ground, a handshake turned to a hug as it all sank in.
I'm sure he's quite glad to be out of that little capsule.
He was shaken, but he was actually quite calm and collective. I was actually quite surprised. I was just talking to him just before and he was actually quite okay.
High in the sky, these domestic daredevils really earn their money. It's an office job with a difference. In 1989, Sydney city workers heard a noise like thunder, looked up and saw 2 men in a window cleaning carriage that was tilted to one side and falling rapidly.
The cable ran loose, spiralled, it snapped, and it free fell probably from about the 2nd floor.
The noise gave pedestrians enough warning to run clear of the falling platform, which bounced into the windows of the building, then crashed to the pavement.
And it was sickening to think that somebody was in there and has been seriously injured, if not worse.
One of the men was catapulted off the gantry and died instantly. His workmate rode the carriage down and was attended to by city workers before paramedics arrived. He suffered head wounds, lacerations and internal injuries. Other building workers were clearly shaken by the incident, and a group of school children were completely overwhelmed by what they had seen. In 2015, this was the scene that confronted Sydney workers as a window cleaner hung from his harness, silent but alive and clearly in agony. He and another man had plunged from near the top of this building in their window cleaning cage.
Very quick, so it's almost like a penny dropping. It was that quick.
Starting to move downward rapidly, sort of spooling down the building like a yo-yo would come down.
The men fell 12 stories, with the office workers inside hearing and feeling it plummeting.
Just a whole lot of shaking, and obviously my colleagues in the office were panicking and screaming. We just saw the ropes just going at a rapid pace.
As the basket fell onto the roof, one of the guys actually threw out like a projectile, and the harness actually saved his life because he ended up being about dangling 3 metres off the floor.
He bounced over the awning, cantilevered over the side, and was just hanging about 8 foot off the ground.
He hung there until a quick-thinking passerby came to his rescue.
We were just driving along the road and the guy was hanging over the edge, and we just pulled up underneath him to take his weight, so we cut the harness off him.
Rescuers arrived to find the two men down, one lying on top of a ute, another on the awning next to the cage. Both, miraculously, alive and conscious.
Quite significant injuries, including leg injuries, back injuries and internal injuries.
It's clear the result could have been much worse for both the window cleaners and the people below.
Lucky that the awning was there because people were walking underneath. It would have killed people 100%.
In a tiny dam on an isolated property near Foster on the New South Wales coast sits a mini excavator. Dan Miller had been working alone when the dam wall slipped away.
On the dam wall, doing nothing major, just moving rocks, planting plans, looked at the dam, thought, oh yeah, I'll take a couple of scoops of mud out, the track shifted, it's no big deal, anyone driving an excavator does it all the time. Moved the bucket again to try and brace myself, and then it was too late, it was going.
The excavator ended up in the dam with Dan trapped beneath it.
Didn't have time to jump clear. I hit the water, went under. The next thing I feel is the roll bar come across my back, and I'm completely underwater. It's very soft, very muddy. So I thought, I've got to get to the surface, push my arms up into the mud and grab a mouthful of air. I pushed myself up for 10 minutes. I'll scream as loud as I could. And then I just screamed, help, 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 help. Hold it for as long as I could, and went down, rest, breathe through the nose for a while. And by that time, a lot of crap from the water, diesel and hydraulic fluid, so it was just all through my nose, short breath. So I take a while, then push myself up, help, 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 help. Went to a very rational place. Thought, I could just give up. There's no way, I'm not letting my daughter. I must think about how they're going to find me face down in a dam, dead on my property. It's like, you can't, a 4-year-old, a 9-year-old and your wife. So that wasn't going to happen. Well, not without a fight. And then I saw the blue Subaru come up the road. I was, oh. So I was euphoric by then. And then I saw her walk around onto the dam wall, and poor thing, I felt so sorry for her. I felt more sorry for her than myself. The look on her face was just terror. She said, what should I do? I said, call Donnie, call Reg, the neighbours.
How he kept himself like arched up with his nose above the waterline was quite incredible for that amount of time. I don't know how he's done it, but it's obviously the willpower to live.
The fireys stabilised the machine, climbed in the dam with me. They're just legends. They're just, mate, this is what we're going to do. Try and dig you out. Stuck their hands down in the mud, dug me out, then everyone just got in the dam and shuffled me out. Hosed me down, and yeah, they were just awesome. They were amazing.
A rescue crew works to free construction worker 28-year-old Justin O'Connor from a 6-metre deep hole. It should have been a relatively straightforward operation.
He fell into a hole, wasn't seriously injured, but he became wedged at the bottom of a rather deep hole. He just needed to be extricated.
On the 12th of May, 1997, Justin went to work on a Melbourne construction project that morning. He knew he was walking into a dangerous workplace. He complained about it to his family a week earlier.
He said, you got to be careful. He says, you got to be careful. You got to be careful where you walk. You got to watch it. He kept on saying that.
Justin was hired to help drill a series of holes using a pile driver rig, but the holes were not secured after they were drilled.
If there is a hole that somebody can fall down, it should be covered over, or it should be guarded with protective handrails so that people can't accidentally fall down those holes. I mean, it's as basic as that.
In a safe workplace, earth is compacted before the drilling occurs. In this case, the earth beneath Justin's feet was loose and slippery.
He was walking across a narrow strip of uncompacted ground that was between two pile holes, presumably lost his footing on this uneven broken ground that was, as I said, soft at the edge and dropping into the pile holes. And what we do know categorically is that he actually fell backwards into the unguarded hole. Went 6 metres down that hole, palm first, with his head and his feet up in the air, down like a V, and stuck at the bottom of the hole.
Justin was shaken, but not badly injured.
There's a Croatian chap that he befriended down there, and he was next to him when he fell. And one of the first things he'd said to him was, Tommy said, please, please, get them to do something about this. See, already, that's the sort of guy he was. His thoughts were sort of beyond himself already, you know?
Ambulance officers were first to arrive. Among them, a man experienced in underwater and tunnel rescues. But recent government restructuring had placed the tunnel rescue in the hands of the fire brigade. When it arrived, officers saw a different solution to Justin's predicament.
They decided to tunnel or excavate into the side of the hole and rescue Justin that way so they could get him, bring him out in a position where if he did have any injuries, it wouldn't further increase the injuries.
It's normal procedure in a trench collapse, but this clearly was not a trench collapse. It was a gentleman who'd fallen down a drilled hole, and the hole was stable.
Meanwhile, water, thought to be from a drain punctured a few days before, began seeping into the hole. Justin tried to alert his rescuers about the water as it rose around him. They told him he'd been watching too many movies. He knew he was in trouble and kept warning them. They continued to ignore him.
He was coherent, he was patient, and he had a lot of courage. They should not have dismissed his cries.
At some point, the rescuers realised that pumps and breathing equipment was urgently required. But the pump they had was the wrong type, and their breathing equipment would not work underwater. He was clearly drowning, and the rescuers were gripped by panic.
Come on, pull the cord.
Finally, the help of the ambulance officer who was first on the scene was re-enlisted.
He's away from the hole, so he doesn't know what's happening. OK, well, I'll get my oxygen, I'll get this, I'll get that. I said, you don't need it. He's drowning. Just get down there and drag him out.
An hour and 40 minutes after falling into the hole, Justin was dragged out in a coma.
They could have changed course, but they didn't. There's a lot of stupidity there, we feel, you know, a little bit of arrogance.
Justin died 5 days later.
Clearly, in the hindsight, this man could have been saved and he should have been saved.
Figures show that in the 14 years from 2003 to 2016, over 3,400 lost their lives in work-related accidents throughout Australia. Risk management, improved technology and maintenance, and occupational health and safety regimes have combined to limit the carnage on the job. But when things get desperate, it's the rescue and emergency services we ultimately rely on.
People ask why you do those things, and the human value of what happens in these disasters is what it's about. That's what charges our battery to do it again.